Well, hello and welcome to the Movie Paradise. I am not your host, Nathanael Molnár, but this is Movie Night Tonight. Every single week, we watch a new film and discuss it in depth, with each month being a new theme. We are currently in the month of the greatest director of all time, Edgar Wright. The film we're discussing is the greatest film to ever be made in 2010 in the world in general. It's Scott Pilgrim versus the World. I am not Nathanael Molnár. I am Matt Smith. And I am joined with a great panel. Today is with me, Nick Polidor.
Hey.
And the real host of the Movie Paradise, the one, the only, Nathanael Molnár.
Wow. Well, I thought I would allow Matt Smith to have the chance to introduce his favorite movie of all time on the Movie Paradise, as he sits here week in, week out, listening to me say the exact same introduction every single time. So, yes,
this is when it's like when they have people from the audience be like be the model on The Price is Right.
Yeah, pretty much. That's essentially what you just listened to right here, right now. So, yes, Nick Polidor, Matt Smith, me, your host, Nathanael Molnár. We're talking about 2010's Scott Pilgrim tonight. Scott Pilgrim versus the World, that is. And so before we get into this discussion, and it is a spoiler discussion, we are talking about this movie as if you watched it with us last night. Nick, what are your first impressions of Scott Pilgrim having watched it last night, and how many times would you say you've seen the movie?
I've seen the movie probably like 24 times or something. I don't know. Wow. But I haven't watched it in like 3 or 4 years, and watching it last night, I interpreted it way different than I did when it came out. It was kind of crazy, but I love this movie.
Yeah.
Excuse me. This movie's sick.
Yeah. Matt, first impressions and how many times you've seen Scott Pilgrim?
Dude, I don't know how many times I've seen it. I've put it on like car rides and planes just like pass the time because I'm like, what do I want to watch? Why not? Maybe I'll see something new this time. I typically do. But no, I love this movie. My favorite director and my favorite movie just go together. It's everything I love. And it's fantastic. And I'm very excited. I've been saying every time I've been on the show, I've been sneaking in. But what about Scott Pilgrim, though? And now I'm here. So what am I going to do with my life after this? I don't know.
You're going to talk about Baby Driver.
You're right.
Next week.
And you bet I'm going to bring up Scott Pilgrim somehow.
Yes. So I've seen Scott Pilgrim. I think this was either my second or third time seeing this movie.
Not enough.
So I have to say that I really like this movie a lot. Like, I loved it. I think it's great. So the last time I'd seen the movie, I wasn't huge into it. I remember thinking, like, it was a lot of style over substance for me. But watching it this time, I liked it, like, a considerable amount more. Like, I just think it is so well done, and it really takes everything that we've been talking about with Edgar Wright this month. And I've given this preface in previous episodes, and I'll give it again here. As we're talking about this month, the topic of this month being Edgar Wright movies, and we're looking at the filmography of a director as a whole, as opposed to just a topic for a genre film or a type of film, we're looking and talking about different things than we usually do. Each film kind of builds on itself as we're talking about the progression, the evolution of a director, in the case for this month. And so, as we've watched and talked about Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz, there are certain things that we've talked about as and distilled and discerned as being qualifications and different things that Edgar Wright does that's very specific to him and his style of filmmaking. And really with Scott Pilgrim, I think we see the truest form of Edgar Wright as a filmmaker. We kind of see everything that he's shown us, and he's shown to be his signature style with his previous films. He like ramps up to 11 in this movie.
Yeah.
He just goes full out crazy with this movie.
Well, that's what I think really allowed him to do that was with because Scott Pilgrim came out before The World's End, which is the final in the Cornetto trilogy. The first two Cornetto trilogies kind of believably took place in our universe. Like, that zombie invasion.
To an extent, yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, with the whole zombie thing. But it was generally meant to be kept within our realms of reality, where Scott Pilgrim, first of all, you're in Canada. And
so you're not within our reality.
Yeah, you're in a completely made-up place.
Yeah, that place does not exist. Yeah, dude, Canada's not real.
Long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Exactly. So that's one thing. And you just have this whole... It's based on a graphic novel, which so it like restrains it in that sense, where you have subject material. But it took place in a world where pirate Indian boys can come crashing through a ceiling and... video game beat 'em up, 8-bit, fight each other, and it was awesome. So it was really cool to see him be able to work with a new universe. Yeah,
new rules, everything's different about this movie than previously.
Like the details in the special effects and everything. It was amazing to see what he could do in like a fictional world. It was great.
This really feels like Edgar Wright just kind of like handcuffs are off, unchained, unfettered Edgar Wright. He can do whatever he wants with this. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head as to why I liked it so much more this time than previous times. Because I think watching it in order of the movies that Edgar Wright has made and watching it in this specific context, it works a lot better. Because when I just watched Scott Pilgrim as just its own thing, it felt so fantastical and so otherworldly. And, like, I felt like it was so much that it didn't exist in any plane of reality. Like, there was no sense of realism to ground it in any sort of way. And so it just felt so completely fantastical.
Even the dialogue, like, in the beginning of the movie, obviously, even since from the opening universal intro, there are hints of like, hey, this is not set in your reality because it's all 8-bit video gamey. And then even right down to the dialogue between characters, like, no one's that whiny and snippy and talks like that. Like, it's really, even the part that, because if you went into Scott Pilgrim not knowing anything about it, which I know a lot of people who did, they've never even, didn't know what it was about or anything. They went into it and they like got up and left by the time the first fight took place because they thought it was like, not like specifically, but they thought it was like set in our reality. Like, you just think it's some kind of like drama about a bassist. Yeah. And then
it really like goes for it.
It just goes from, they just 0 to 100. As soon as that guy comes crashing through that ceiling, it's like...
But that's why I think I liked it so much more this time, is because seeing it in context of Edgar Wright's other movies and understanding more his style, his signature as a director.
Yes.
And knowing what to expect from an Edgar Wright movie and having seen him do comedy in other movies, seen him do a lot of what he does in this, but in a different form and kind of in a different context than his other films. Yep. I really came to appreciate it more and understand it more rather than just seeing it as some sort of... It didn't feel as arbitrary or random as it kind of did the first time I watched it, because there's precedent for it in previous films. Matt, it looks like you're itching to talk about this movie.
The first time watching it, I understand, can like kind of be overwhelming because the way I've always considered this movie.
That's a good word for the first
time because the way I see this movie is that just no one told Edgar Wright no. He's just like, you want to do that? Like, yeah, sure, throw that in there, and it's interesting you talking about how like not grounded in reality is because it is so much more grounded in reality than like the comics are.
Yeah.
Because it goes crazy. And interesting note is that, like, I've said this a couple times, but the comics were written at the same time as the movie. The first comic book came out, and then the movie started being written. So, like, in terms of, like, source material, you had these two things going at the same time. So it's really interesting how... I feel like if you could really compare it to other things where they weren't limited by the source material. They were actually able to go with it and experiment even more with it because it wasn't written yet.
Yeah.
But, like, in terms of, like, reality, it's like... one thing I noticed, because I think this is, like, either the first time I've watched it after reading the graphic novels, but... when Ramona is delivering the package for the first time, and she says something about like you have a subspace highway in your head, like that's an actual thing in the graphic novels, like subspace, and that's how she travels around. That's how people get around. Like that's a big part of the graphic novels that's just not in the movie at all.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. So it's interesting hearing people say, "Oh, it's not like reality at all," when like it goes so much more.
So I have not read the comics, so I have no concept of this. Is this movie, because you said they were kind of working on them at the same time, does the story of the movie cover the story of all the graphic novels, or was it like set up in a way that it kind of covers the first book with kind of a door open for sequels, which they didn't end up making any sequels?
Yeah, no, the graphic novels span the entire all 7 fights, and it's more just stuff. There's other parts, like there's a little bit before. There's
more lore
and
stuff. It goes into Scott's past relationships more.
Yeah, like you hear about him and Kim, him and Envy.
So the story of this movie is the story of all the graphic novels.
Yeah, and they reference it. There are a lot of references to the graphic novels in the book.
Yeah.
And like especially one thing I love about this movie is that there are like it looks like a comic book. The movie, like in terms of his style, especially with showing multiple things in the frame, or just like how the characters are acting and how they're speaking. It's like a comic book, short little phrases. The way it moves, it looks like the transitions make it like a move from panel to panel. Yeah, like there's not a lot of blinking in the movie, and that was a specific thing Edgar Wright told them not to do. Was like don't. He didn't tell them like don't blink, because that's not necessarily possible. But I noted in watching it this time, I never really noticed it before, but they do not blink a lot because they were told to do that. So there's a lot of details that make it look how it looks, which is why I think it looks so much different from any other movie.
Yeah. I would say one thing I was thinking of while I was watching this was, does it have more of a comic book feel or a video game feel? Because it definitely has both of those, but I couldn't get a read on which one it felt more like.
I think it is just both. Or it's a comic book. It's a comic book that based on a comic book that's supposed to look like a video game. I feel like like the events are supposed to be like a video game.
It's like a Big Mac, but with comic books and video games. So you got a little bit of everything everywhere.
I was really wondering where you're going.
You take a bite of it and you don't really know what's in your mouth, but it's good. So you know what? This is Scott Pilgrim.
Movie night tonight. What's in your mouth?
No, like the all of the on-screen like elements and like the titles when a new character shows up, and it says like name and like description and like level, or what level they are, or the fact that every time he defeats one of the X's, a score pops up, like a video game. Like that's all in the comics, so it's very like 1-to-1.
Yeah,
a lot of the
it's very faithful.
A lot of the shots are, and even. Sometimes they even when Ramona's giving flashbacks, those are just comic book panels from the comics. Yeah. So it's like it is very 1-to-1, but it's done in a very good, interesting way.
Yeah. No, I completely agree, and I think this is the first Edgar Wright movie that we've watched that just all in all is so completely different, because we've been used to with both Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz. We've been used to the same two actors playing not exactly the same role, but similar kinds of roles in both films.
It's the same setup. It's the same setup.
Exactly. It's the same setup, and then just kind of different story and different events. And while those two, and we spent pretty much the entire Hot Fuzz discussion just kind of comparing the two, with Scott Pilgrim, we get something, it's so completely different. One, it's based on source material, which the two other films did not have. Completely different actors. No Simon Pegg, no Nick Frost. And just
100% more Michael Cera.
Yes. This film is just so radically different from the other ones, and yet it's consistent with what we've seen from Edgar Wright.
Before, Edgar Wright was driving on a track, and he drove on the track really well, though. Like, that was great. He got, like, the high score.
Yeah.
But, like, now he's, like, on a highway. He was driving on a highway, and he drove really fast down the highway. Like, go, Edgar.
Yeah.
Yo, you do whatever you want.
I have to say, so one of my complaints that I had with Hot Fuzz was that I said that I didn't get into the story as much. This one, complete opposite. I was like completely invested. And I think that's where the genius of this film is. And I think sometimes you can, when you watch this movie, or especially with some of my first experiences with this film, you can kind of overlook the subtlety and the nuance of it. Because while it is big and flashy and so much is going on screen and there's so much to process, there's also this really human story and really human characters.
Yeah.
And that roots it in this sense of reality when there's so much non-reality and unreality going on.
Yeah.
I got into this story of Scott Pilgrim and just his quest to find love and find out who he was, and all these problems that arise and all these issues. And they were really more introspective issues, things that he had to deal with himself. He had to come to grips with who he was as a person.
He had to, like, in the end, he had to earn the power of self-respect.
Exactly.
Because he was like a to me IRL for me IRL guy. Like, he was like ultimate sad boy.
Yeah. But yeah, and I think that's what makes it deeper, and I think that's what makes me go back on what I was saying, that it's style over substance. There's style, definitively there's style, and there's a lot of it, but the style is rooted in character, and the style is rooted in the story, and so really it's the substance accompanies the style, and I think that's what makes it work. Because you can have, and I kind of say this for, and there's a lot of action in movie, but I say this for action, and I say this for horror, and I say this for any kind of genre of film. Genre elements for genre elements' sake doesn't work. If you just have a horror movie where the horror is happening just for the horror's sake, it's not rooted in anything, it's not grounded in anything, it feels kind of just like fluff. It doesn't feel like it actually has any value, any substance to it. And in the case of Scott Pilgrim, you have all this stuff going on, but it's all rooted in something. It's all rooted in character development. It's all rooted in Scott as a character. It's all rooted in his growth and his arc and his evolution as a character from where he begins at the beginning to where he ends up. And I think that's why it all works. That's why it has meaning. That's why it has value, because it's rooted in something more than just it being flashy and big and a spectacle piece for it being a spectacle piece's sake.
Yeah, and I've always noticed how I feel like this movie could easily felt like it was action for action's sake, or at least be kind of jarring, because it is very like the action is start and stop.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, oh, who's this person? Oh, you dated them? Okay, let's fight. But I feel like it just goes into the fight and then leaves the fight just, like, very smoothly. Like, it's not, like, jarring. They kind of pick up after the fight exactly where they left off in the same, like, just tone that's kept through the entire movie.
Yeah.
Like, when Scott gets thrown through the wall, they're like, all right, we're going to go get some pizza. And then after the fight, it just immediately cuts to the pizza shop. He's got, like, the soda on his head. Like, I just murdered a guy, but, yeah.
You just headbutted my boyfriend.
This was something that I think I said while we were watching the movie. The cast in this movie was so stacked.
Oh, yeah.
So many big stars. And it's funny how so many people in here were not huge stars when the movie came out, but have since become huge stars.
Edgar Wright and what's her name started dating while they were working together on that set. Anna, what's her name?
Anna Kendrick?
Yeah.
Really? I did not realize that.
Yeah, they were dating for a while. They met while she was on Scott Pilgrim.
Wow.
So it's like the movie was stacked, but no one knew it yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Like Captain America and Captain Marvel are in it.
And
Superman.
Which one was Superman?
Brandon Routh, the vegan, played
Todd Ingram.
He was Superman in Superman Returns.
I knew he looked familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, wow. That cat, so And then Aubrey Plaza is in it. We're just talking about Anna Kendrick.
Yeah. Oh, Kim Pine.
Yeah.
Kim.
Yeah. And
I forget her name, but
from Arrested Development.
Yeah.
Egg.
Yeah.
Yeah, but isn't Anne? Is it Anne?
And what's his name? Young Neil. He's in some other things. And
Yeah.
Mae Whitman too.
Yeah. And Mary Elizabeth Winstead.
Yeah.
I love her. She's excellent. This cast is so good, and everyone is great in this movie. Like, it's just everyone feels so well cast for their role. Probably, I think my favorite character, other than like the main characters, my favorite character has to be Chris Evans.
Oh yeah.
As what's his character's name?
Lucas Lee.
Lucas Lee. He was just awesome in this. Like he's so funny and he's so
really
good
is.
in this.
I think one of the most subtly really niche good characters in that movie is Komu, the guy who knows everybody. He had like a few lines, and like I just think it's like one of those side characters that's not important, but like really ties it together.
Yeah,
I love his interaction. The first time we see him, his interactions with Scott when he's asking about Ramona is one of my favorite, like, back and forth. Especially when he pulls up the picture of just the very curly picture of Ramona. It's like, you know this girl? Yeah, Ramona Flowers.
and you just go with it. And that's something that Edgar Wright, that's a kind of joke or kind of gag that he's done in his other films, and so you just see that and you just roll with it.
The phone coming into frame that is in Shaun of the Dead and in Hot Fuzz is in this. Like, it's just phone coming into frame. Edgar Wright's thing.
Yeah, one of his trademarks.
Yeah, I remember like the first time seeing that in the theaters, and everyone was laughing so hard when it's like people were popping up in bed after each other. And everyone was like, dude, this guy is awesome. He's so good at what he does. He's great.
Some of the cuts when the lead singer, Stephen Stills, like, Scott, like, I forget, what is it? Scott's, like, spacing out, and then he, like, puts his head in the side of the frame, and then immediately back, they're just walking. They're somewhere completely different.
Yep.
That goes into something I was wanting to talk about, in that when we were talking about Shaun of the Dead, we were talking about Edgar Wright's unique way of doing montages, where it just kind of punches in on something and then it just keeps punching in on new things to kind of show the progression of time. And he does it differently in this, in that you have like there was a whole montage sequence where Scott Pilgrim was talking to his friends, and they would just be in one location, and then it would be like a close in on someone's head, and then they'd be somewhere else, and it just keeps jumping to new locations. It was just a very different kind of montage, and I found it interesting that Edgar Wright includes, like, he's accomplishing the same thing, but doing it in such a completely different way.
I think the placement of that montage was absolutely perfect, because it made me actually feel like I was Scott.
Yeah.
Which is really cool, because this is like right after he sees Ramona at the library for the first time. The music's going, and then he wakes up, he's at practice. And it's like, oh, that's why. And like, but when the band stops playing at practice, the music cuts out too. So it really immerses you. And then when it just cuts that to that night from there, it's like, wow, he can't even remember what he's doing or where he's going, because he's thinking about this girl. And I thought that was really neat.
Yeah, it captures that sense of, like, he kind of has like a lack of an understanding of time. And just kind of, he's just drifting through his day. And it captures that visually in such a striking way.
And, like, some of the cuts are just, like, they're cut on, like, before and after cuts. There's a lot of just, like, repeated dialogue. Or I think it's when, before they go to the party, like, right before and after the cut, they say the exact same thing. Or, like, they say it in, like, the reverse order. It's like, oh, cut. Oh.
Yeah.
Or it's like, we can do this. Cuts. There's no way we can do this, guys. It's like, it's like there's so much, like, before and after the cut, which makes the cut, like, so obvious. But before and after, it's like, there's a lot of it.
So we've talked about with Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz, we've talked about the editing styles of those films. I'm curious, and Matt, as an editor yourself, looking at the three films, how would you say the editing style is different with Scott Pilgrim than the other two?
Well, it's I feel weird saying it's more noticeable. How do you get more noticeable in Shaun of the Dead? But it seems like it's very deliberate in the sense that it's like not the screen isn't moving. No, the screen isn't like, it's not changing. It's moving from like one area to another.
Yeah.
Like a comic book panel. Like that's how I describe it, because that's what I'm assuming they were going for. Like it's a lot of just, it's here in one area, and then it seems like the screen just moves and we're seeing something else, not like a change. And then there's like a lot of just like people passing by like multiple times. Will just do that over and over again, because that's how you would portray that in a comic book. You would just show them in each individual scene or each individual space, and it's just, we're there, now we're here, now we're there, now we're outside, now we're inside. Like just very like purposeful.
Yeah, fluid.
Yeah.
I think Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead feel more acoustic, where Scott Pilgrim feels more artificial. And I don't mean that in any sort of negative sense. Just like the way the cinematography feels, because the comedy editing and pretty much every funny thing with like sound editing and all that's set within the universes that Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead are. But with the universe Scott Pilgrim is set in, especially being in a band and having all the music effects you can do too, I think a lot more of that shows, but it feels less natural. It does feel more comic booky, like the comedy in the, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
like some of the dialogue to an extent, but like the little audio things, like when Kim does the and like she can do that, and it has like that little effect and that little comedy around it.
Yeah.
But
for those listening, when she pretended to shoot herself in the head, and then she hits the drums. Right?
Yes. Yep. Sorry, I didn't. Just,
no worries.
Oh, they're supposed to just know what that means. Yeah. But I think that it compares to the editing and the comedy and all that in Scott Pilgrim. I think that's how it compares to the other two movies. It just feels, this is more electric guitar. The other two are more acoustic guitar.
That's a really good comparison. I like that. Yeah. You're full of good comparisons today.
I'm going to pretend to understand that. It was very good. Perfect explanation. I know what that means. I'm a music person. I just hang around with a lot of music.
I don't know. Maybe one person. I hope someone gets it. It'll mean a lot to that one person.
I mean, for on-screen stuff similar to that, there's the when they're playing bass, and the notes are just like shooting out, or like if
all the sound effects.
Yeah, a lot of the sound effects just have text to accompany it, like the school bell, like the bring, like it's just spelled out right there.
And I'm assuming, I've never read the comics, but I'm assuming that is like animated into the comics.
Yeah,
and they just bring it right in the movie. Yeah, that's awesome, dude. Sweet.
Yeah, I
love sticking to the source material.
Exactly. Like I love that as a comic book reader myself. Like you get that with any comic book, because that's the nature of comic books, and to see that brought to life, especially when we got to the fight scene where Scott was fighting all of the
stunt doubles.
Yeah, the stunt doubles. And you have all this. It was reminding me so much of like the 1960s Adam West Batman show, where anytime he'd fight, you get giant text. He'd hit someone and go, bam, boom, kapow. And it reminded me so much of that. And it was like, but it wasn't done in a cheesy way. And that's something about this movie, is I feel like everything that they do in this movie could come across as cheesy or contrived or forced, but it doesn't at all. It strikes this perfect tone where it all works so well.
I feel like that's like the fan base of these two movies. Like, one side of the fan base is super like extra about it, and then the other side of the fan base is like, oh dude, that movie's sick. Yeah. But like, you know what I mean? Just like I don't know. Never mind. I don't know.
No, it is. It can. I could see how this could be a polarizing film. I could see how someone could watch this and just think it's noise, and that
they think it's like cringy.
It's sugar.
Like, it could be. I mean, it could be cringy.
Yeah.
I mean,
anything with Michael Cera is cringy, but
I mean, people always look at it like, they just look at the beginning, like the first half, and they're like, wow, Scott is a horrible person.
Yeah.
I don't like him at all. And like, that's like, I watched this movie. The reason I've watched it so many times is I watched it so many times in high school. I was like a sophomore, junior in high school when this movie came out, and I related it to it so heavily because like I had high school boy girl problems. I related it to so heavily. I thought Scott was the best. I wanted to be like Scott, and then I watch it now. I'm like, dude, I don't want to be like Scott. I don't want to like like date high schoolers at 22. Like, first of all, what's he doing? Come on,
dating high schoolers just as a rebound, not even a rebound, just like getting over still because he's still not over his.
Dude, that's so weird. That's that you can tell. Like, I was thinking about it. Like, oh, this movie was made this decade. Like, when we do our it's 2019, we got to do our decade lists.
Yeah,
and I'm like, wow, like that's like so 2010 and 2009. I'm like, I wouldn't even want to watch this movie. Like,
yeah. I think that's one of the things that this movie has sort of an impossible task in how, and this happens with a lot of movies where you have an unlikable leading character.
Yeah.
How do you get people to become invested in that character when it is very deliberately set up that you are not supposed to like Scott? Scott is not a good person.
That's the thing. I thought it was fine. I didn't think he was a bad person. I just thought it was normal, and when I watch it now, I'm like, dude, he's horrible.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Especially like when he's talking to Knives, and he's like, "Oh, what were you saying about me?" Or like the entire like, "Oh yeah, no, she can geek. She has a capacity to geek." It's like, no, I mean, I don't remember when I had the realization that Scott was a horrible person, but it kind of does change it a little bit, and you start to notice it more, just like how much like an ego and like how like thick-headed he is. Like he doesn't understand anything. Like he's like you're the scum of the earth. He's like, yeah, thank you. Like it's great.
But I think that works so well because he does change as a character.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And what I love that about the ending. Like, it's not the power of love that he needed to learn because he knew how to love. He needed to love himself, and then when he comes back, he gets the power of self-respect. That's what he needed. And I like that it does have a good message because the reason he is one of the reasons he is being such a bad guy is because he doesn't love himself and he doesn't care that he's,
Well, he was so broken by when he was dumped by Captain Marvel.
I mean, if Captain Marvel dumped me, I'd be pretty upset.
That'd be the highlight of my life, being dumped by Captain Marvel. So, but I mean, I feel he was so broken after that. And to see how that affected him so deeply and psychologically, and how really this is a movie about how he is recovering from that.
Well, that's the thing, is also, it wasn't her dumping him that made him the horrible person. It was him that made him, because he had no self-respect.
Yeah.
I don't know, that's the reason. Wait, what?
Yeah. But I feel like where we pick up with him in the very beginning of the movie, a lot of who he is then is a result of the pain of being broken up with. And he kind of builds this sort of shell around him. He kind of puts on this egotistical facade and this hardened shell, and he wants to desperately just be kind of like this cool, nonchalant guy. And then it's sort of as the film progresses, and not just as Ramona's past is being opened up layer by layer, so is his. And when those come into butt heads and those come into confliction, that's when he is kind of forced to change. And as you were pointing out, the whole point of it by the end of the movie is that he has to learn self-respect and to love himself. And I think a big reason of why he has been unable to love himself is because of the anxiety and the heartbreak and everything that comes from being dumped by someone he presumably loved so much.
Right, yeah.
And I feel like a lot of those issues that he has to come to grips with throughout the film came and originated from that moment. You can kind of almost think of that as the catalyst that set up this entire movie like a year before the film takes place and starts, in that kind of really instigated all these issues that Scott Pilgrim has that he has to come to grips with. And I think that's really what makes it really deep of a movie is that the problems that Scott Pilgrim has is rooted in his past relationships. But as he's going forward, in order to solve those own inner issues that he has to actively fight the previous relationships of the girl he's dating now. And so it's all kind of tied into these same basic concept and these same issues and same motifs that that really just kind of bring the whole film together.
Yeah, there's a lot of... Well, first of all, one thing I was going to mention is, like, there are multiple times when he, like, straight up, like, uses the fact that he got his heart broken as an excuse for how he acts. Mm-hmm. Like, there's I just had in my head, what was it? But basically, he's just, like, every time someone, like, talks about it, he's always like, well, I got... Especially at the very end. Mm-hmm. Not the very end. After he fights Todd Ingram, he said, you headbutted my boyfriend. Yeah, well, I think he says you headbutted my heart.
Yeah, something like
that. But, like, it's clear the whole time that, like, he just doesn't care that he's treating people horribly because he was treated horribly in the exact same way. And at the end, I think he realizes that when he's, like, basically just straight out told, like, when he first time he has to, like, admit to cheating on both of them, he doesn't really admit it.
Yeah.
He's like, no, I didn't cheat on you with her. I cheated on her with you.
Yeah.
But, like, the second time through... Which, I love that whole sequence when he comes back. It's very much like what happens when you lose in a video game, but you already know what you're doing. Mm-hmm. So he just runs by. And the second time, he just flat out says, like, yeah, I cheated on both of you. Knives don't come out and attack Ramona as Knives is coming out and attacks Ramona. But, no, like, at the very ending, like, when he changes, it's very abrupt. Like, he just, after he dies, it just clicks in his head. He's like, oh. And then he has to go through everything. He's so determined, and then immediately he just lays out everything, just apologizes for everything.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the genius of that whole sequence when he goes and does it again, is that's when you really see his growth. That's how that's when you see how he has changed as a character. Because he is literally getting to do this again, and he has literally learned from his mistakes and is doing things differently. And it's sort of a very... visual way that's consistent with the style of the film to showcase how he has grown as a character and how he's changing.
Yeah, there's a lot. Oh, sorry, but I was going to say there's a lot of just stuff that's in the movie that's just on the nose. It's like this is like
or very blunt. Yeah,
yeah. It's like and it works.
Yeah,
it's like it doesn't feel like because I think at this point the audience already knew it. Like the audience already is seeing everything he's doing wrong. Like there's no like. Understanding that he's not a good person.
Yeah.
So when he has to change, it's really just for him. Everyone else already knows everything that's going on. But he's like the last one to realize.
That's a good point.
That he's been treating people horribly.
Yeah.
You ever see the alternate ending?
No, I have not.
Oh. You never seen it?
No.
What did you think about the ending?
Oh, which part specifically?
The last scene, him leaving Knives to go to a new life and move away with Ramona.
I liked it. I felt like it worked for me, at least, because it's kind of that's what he's been fighting for the entire movie. He's been fighting for that, and so it felt right to see it end the way that it should have, and that it was building towards that. Is the alternative ending that he doesn't end up with Ramona?
Yeah, I forget the exact exchange of dialogue because I haven't seen it in so long. I just remember what it was. Ramona leaves and he goes to date Knives.
Yeah. They even say it in the movie, like, and I think it's Knives that says, she's what you've been fighting for. Because the original, last time I checked, it was the original was supposed to be. He ends up with Knives.
Yeah, maybe he was saying something like, no, I was fighting for me or something, and then to Knives, and then, I don't know, but I remember that's the ending, or the alternate ending.
Yeah. I mean, I'd have to watch the actual scene to know how it works, but hearing it, first impressions of hearing that feels like that would be anticlimactic. Like, that just feels like...
right?
Yeah, that just feels like he's been quite literally, this is the goal. Like, if you just look at it from a screenwriting point of view, his goal throughout the whole movie is to be with Ramona, and everything that every obstacle that comes in his way, he's fighting against it to reach that goal. Mm-hmm. And it would feel weird if at the end he didn't meet that goal.
I think I have heard before that the original ending was he was supposed to end up with knives at the end, mm-hmm. which kind of makes sense when you consider like, the whole like doing it for himself thing.
Yeah,
it's him. You kind of see it because it's him and the final fight is him and Knives working together to beat Gideon. Yeah, for some reason I thought I got his name wrong, but it's them working together. So it kind of makes sense that could be the direction they were going towards. But then it was changed, so he ends up with Ramona. Yeah, because that is what he was fighting for, and that is how it ends. And I think that's how it ends in the novels as well. So it would make more. I think it would also make sense for them to match.
Yeah, but it just feels right that way. Yeah, it's kind of, this is going back a little ways. It's kind of like the conversation we had when Harry met Sally. We kind of had the same conversation. Of people saying that they shouldn't have ended up together, and then two of us saying that it worked better that way.
Why did we watch? It's like, it's not, obviously that's not how it works in real life. You always don't end up together, like it just seemed to happen. But like, why did I watch this? It does feel like, why did I watch this movie?
Yeah.
If there's not the feel good, everyone's happy, I'm happy for them. And
right. Yeah.
Is this when you're gonna go into your tirade about La La Land?
You didn't need to bring it up.
Yes, I did.
You didn't need to bring up La La Land. For La La Land, at least they like show what could have happened.
Mm-hmm. But it didn't happen. But that's not canon.
It's canon in my head, Nathan.
No, it's not.
No, it's okay because they end up together in Crazy Stupid Love.
That is true. Yep.
Did you guys pick up on all the references to the numbers of the X's in the movie? There's a lot of them.
Right. There's probably about 1 billion things that I did not pick up on in this movie.
Yeah, trying to pick up on. There's a lot of cute little things they did. Yeah.
Yeah. The first two, Matthew Patel, when he points at Scott Pilgrim, he points out with one finger. When Lucas Lee does it, he does it with two. Matthew Patel only has one eye showing. I think Lucas Lee has like a 2 like tattooed on like his neck. It's not very visible, but it's there. And then Todd Ingram is wearing the 3. Mm-hmm. Throughout almost the whole movie, or when Todd has a number. Not Todd. When Scott has a number, it's 0. But one thing that I didn't realize until I think I watched a video about it, after the fight with Roxy, number 4, he wears a T-shirt, and him and Ramona kind of have a fight. He's wearing a T-shirt that says 4.5, like symbolizing that like he might be becoming an X. I thought that was really cool. And there's just a lot of X's in the film.
Yeah.
There's one.
I thought those were kisses.
And there's that one very like obvious shot where there's like a bunch of X signs around him.
Yeah.
And that there's 2 that are completely different color from the other one because he'd beaten 2 X's at that point.
There's a lot. Yeah. As you would expect from Edgar Wright, there's a ton of hidden detail.
Yep. Yeah. It was very cool.
Yeah. The points is probably one of my most noticeable ones. Every time he beats his X, he gets a certain amount of points. Mm-hmm. Like the first one was 1,000 points. The second one was 2,000 points. And it just goes up all the time. And when he beats the twins, it goes from 5,000 to 6,000.
I think one of my favorite scenes in this movie is with Brandon Routh and the whole vegan sequence. With the vegan police showing up. It was perfect.
Yeah. The high five is
Chicken
so
isn't vegan?
Chicken isn't vegan? I remember because I was on the Scott Pilgrim subreddit for various reasons because I liked it. But it was earlier this month, and everyone was freaking out about April the 4th, and I was like, what is that? And then I think that's the date that he eats gelato. I think that's the day he eats the chicken parmesan. And I was like, what's this? Why is the subreddit going crazy about this one day? And then I watched the scene. I was like, oh, cool. We get to celebrate.
So everyone, like,
the 12 people in the Scott Pilgrim subreddit.
Like a few dozen more chicken parms were sold that day than normal around the world.
That's how you celebrate Scott Pilgrim
That
versus
is
the world.
It's like the May the 4th, but for Scott Pilgrim.
That's crazy.
It's April the 4th.
Crazy
April
how
the
that day works.
Yeah.
No, it's cool. That's one of my favorite scenes, and maybe that's why I sometimes like to joke about vegans. It just comes because the movie did.
You can eat vegetables and still denounce veganism.
I feel like like the joke in that movie is very early because I don't know. I feel like the jokes about vegans is more modern. Well, I don't know. Technically, 2010 is modern, but I feel like in the last few years, it's more prevalent than it. I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying.
I mean, there's a lot of the when he's like saying that he's ovo-lactarianism vegan, when he's like, I don't eat the meat or the breast milk of anything with a face.
Oh no, he's like, anyone can be vegan. He's like, go lacto something. He's like, I don't know.
And then Envy's like, make it short. Just being vegan makes you better than most people.
Yep, that's how it works, dude. That's how it works.
What was it? He says, he's like, don't you know, I'm vegan. It's not really a big deal or anything.
Yeah, like as he's like holding him up like with telekinetic powers, it's not really a big deal.
No vegan diet, no vegan powers.
No vegan power. De-veganize Ray. And his hair falls off.
I used to always do that. I used to like get a Big Mac and post like a picture of it on my Snapchat, like vegan Big Mac.
Big Macs aren't vegan?
I was just gonna say that.
I do like that fight. I like how some of the fights end with him actually defeating them, like just like beating them. But then some fights are just like outsmarting them, or when he's like, "Can you do a rail thingy?"
Yeah,
it's like there are girls watching, and he does it, and then he just explodes at the bottom. He's like, "Yes, great." One of my favorite fights, which is interesting because the Katanaki twins are like one of the main characters that are kind of like cut, I guess, when you consider between the novels and the books. Like they're like actual characters. They're not just there. But I do really love their fight in the movie, the Amp versus Amp turning into giant monsters.
Yeah.
I love when
we all have that one pedal on our on our pedal board that just really does it.
Especially when the Scott's monster, like the eyes are like just like glowing green on both of them, and like he's just like putting.
Oh, everything. Now I know you
that's
like
me.
It so much.
That's me when I play shows. That's exactly how I feel.
I just love that so much. I love the song too. It's just so like I think it just works. This is the beginning of the song. I love it.
We are here to make you think about death and feel sad and stuff.
So, as we bring this discussion to a close, let's go around and say what our final thoughts are on the film, starting with Nick Polidor.
Okay, this movie, I would always consider it my favorite movie, like I used to. I loved it so much when I was in high school. I think I was like 15 when it came out, 15, 16, and I watched it over and over and over and over. I loved it. Now that I watch it now, I like it more as a movie and less of a relatable piece. My view of the movie has totally changed, but I still like it. I just like it a little different. But yeah, this movie is sick, dude. It's wicked great. It's unique. It's I don't know, drink a Monster Energy before you watch it or something. Like
yeah.
this isn't really, you can watch it with the lights on. This isn't really like a, get super deep. It's like you can have fun with it.
Yeah.
You have fun with it.
It's a fun movie.
Yeah, you can check Reddit a couple times. You're going to miss some cool stuff, but yeah, you're good. You're good. Yeah.
Matt, final thoughts?
Yeah. This is my favorite movie. One thing a lot of my favorite movies come from, especially why I like Edgar Wright, is I like movies that take full advantage of being a movie. I think using the screen in creative ways and like not wasting, but like pushing it to the limit of what you can do on screen and with effects and see everything.
Yeah.
So and this movie is just like it's just so much.
Yeah. It's just packed to the brim.
There's just so much in every frame of this movie. And I think that's why when I see a movie that could, be more creative with its use of the frame, It's like I wish they did, because it's just this movie just there's nothing missing just everywhere. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. I love this movie. I love Edgar Wright. Yeah, I don't know. How do I put it into words? I don't know.
Yeah. So my final thoughts on Scott Pilgrim versus the World. I like this considerably more than the previous time I watched it. I really picked up on a lot of things I didn't pick up on before. I really see why it is not a case of style over substance. I see a lot more of the substance in this film. I think it is big and it's flashy and there's tons of spectacle and so much going on, but it's also rooted in character and narrative. And while there's so much fantasy going on and fantastical, whimsical things going on, it is rooted in a very small, but it is rooted in some semblance of reality, enough so that you can get behind it and you can get invested in it. This is a movie I feel like I said when we were watching, I said, I don't even know how you begin to go about directing this. It's really like an impossible task to direct and make a movie like this. And I feel like more so than any of the other, or at least Edgar Wright movies that we've seen, it is such a clear demonstration of Edgar Wright's abilities as a director. I mean, the previous films, they definitely took, like Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz, they definitely took an ability as a filmmaker to make. You need to have the sensibilities and the capabilities of someone like an Edgar Wright to pull those movies off, but no more so than Scott Pilgrim. I feel like that is really where, that is make or break it as a filmmaker. And Edgar Wright proves that he can take all these moving parts, all these different things, this very fine line that he is walking as a director in making this movie, and he is able to pull it off and do it just right. So I think this is kind of like a masterclass in directing. But it's not in the way like that you would think. This isn't like the big Oscar contender film that, you know, everyone thinks of as being the showcase of your abilities as a filmmaker. It's completely different, but it shows an ability to direct in a very different kind of way than other movies.
Yeah, this movie really could have taken as much work, if not more, than a lot of other Oscar winners. Yeah. This movie did horribly in the box office. I forget why. Yeah, isn't that weird? Isn't that a bummer?
I mean, it's such a weird movie that
no one knew what it was either, because the graphic novels were coming out at the same time. So like no one knew what it was.
I think I heard something about all of Edgar Wright's movies collectively is just under $200 million, and half of that is Baby Driver.
I was gonna say how much was Baby Driver?
Yeah, Baby Driver was one something, but then all of the Cornetto trilogy and Scott Pilgrim is it's between 10 and 20.
Yeah,
and I'm how is that?
Well, I looked it up, and the budget on Scott Pilgrim is $85 million.
Wow.
Which is, I was thinking it was more like 100, but I don't know how much the Shaun of the Dead or Hot Fuzz was, but that's considerably more than those movies. So, it does not surprise me that it tanked at the box office, which is unfortunate, but I mean, at least the movie got made.
Yeah, no, I think it has a good enough fan base that it's pretty loyal.
Yeah, it's a cult classic.
Yeah, it's great. I think it's great. I'm excited for Baby Driver.
Well, that is a perfect segue into the next movie that we're going to be talking about. We're going to be closing off
The World's End.
Unfortunately not. Unfortunately not. But I think on our own we're going to end up watching World's End over the weekend or something like that, because
it's Hot Fuzz 1.5.
But the next movie we're talking about in our final week of our month of Edgar Wright films will be 2017's Baby Driver, which is my personal favorite Edgar Wright movie.
Yeah, me too. Oh yeah, that movie's hot.
And it is in my top 20 all-time favorite movies. Adore that movie.
It's in my top 10 for sure. That movie is the movie I don't want taking my daughter to prom. That movie is Fast and Furious, dude. That movie is crazy. That movie is That movie's too hot.
Yeah.
It's great.
Well, we'll have to have you back for the
I'll
Baby Driver
be back,
discussion.
dude.
Awesome. So, yes, check out next week when we discuss Baby Driver. That will be dropping next Saturday, as all new episodes of Movie Night Tonight drop online on Saturdays on YouTube, on Spotify, and on iTunes. So you can find all of our previous episodes of Movie Night Tonight there, as well as future episodes going forward. They drop on Saturdays. Once again, I am your host, Nathanael Molnár. I'd like to thank my panel for being with me. Nick Polidor, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. I was glad to have you. And I realized, I think the last time you were on Movie Night Tonight was our debut episode for Whiplash.
Yeah, it was. I didn't know if that was like the first episode ever.
That was the first episode.
There was nothing before that?
Nothing. That was the first episode of Movie Night Tonight.
Wow. You thought I was killed off because I didn't do well with the fans, but no, I'm back. I was just...
we love having you here. And Matt Smith, I'm glad you were able to work it into your schedule to do Scott Pilgrim. I know you're on the fence about doing the episode.
Yeah, it's just like, why would I be here? What is this movie?
Yeah.
It says George Michael in it. Yeah. All right.
And so, yes, you can. So make sure to like, comment, subscribe for more content. Be sure to follow us on all of our various social medias at Movie Night TNT. That's Movie Night TNT. There you can find the links to our YouTube, to our Spotify, to our iTunes, where new episodes of Movie Night Tonight drop every single Saturday. So until we discuss Baby Driver next week, thanks for listening.